doggone good reason why they did it.
Senator Hatch is offering hope to Mr. Three Dots and his abandoned family. But the problem is, it may not come in time.
You can't imagine how close death is when you have cancer. Doctor says to you, you have cancer. You know you're going to die. Well, I got a cancer that's incurable, and I have no doctor. I have no fail-safe system. I can't take any narcotics for the pain. I mean, where do I go? Where do I turn? I don't think anybody out there can answer that.
This is a classic case of the arrogance of power. Willful officials have washed their hands of a human life because their authority was challenged. The man in charge of the Justice Department is Attorney General William French Smith. Well, I'm putting him on notice now. If any member of the Three Dots family is murdered, he'll have blood on his hands. When I return, we'll meet victims of asbestos lung disease. Was there a corporate cover-up?
Denture wearers speak out about denture adhesives.
Hate them all.
I love mine.
What? Pastes are gooey and powders are gritty.
Not my adhesive. I use Liquid Dentrol, the first liquid denture adhesive.
A liquid?
You bet. Dentrol is smooth without all that goo and grit, and it flows on in a thin stream that holds so comfortably you almost forget you're wearing dentures. Now what do you have to say?
I'm in love with Liquid Dentrol denture adhesive.
For a comfortable hold.
This is asbestos ore, perhaps the most controversial material in America. For years, it's been made into building insulation. Neighborhoods literally became white with asbestos dust as it was sprayed or applied into just about every form of building construction. It was the single best protection against fires. 10 million Americans worked in the asbestos industry. Additional millions were exposed to asbestos dust. Then it was discovered that the dust was lethal. Now there's new evidence that it causes cancer. Meanwhile, the Johns Manville Company has been hit with so many lawsuits over asbestos that it's filed for bankruptcy. I assigned my associate, Jack Mitchell, to investigate the story behind the bankruptcy. He uncovered evidence that the industry knew asbestos caused cancer and hid this knowledge from its workers for years. Mitchell spoke to one of the workers, Maurice Mealy, in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Do you now believe that the Manville officials knew that there was a health hazard which they weren't telling you and your fellow workers about at the time?
Well, if they knew about it, they really kept it quiet, because nobody would talk about that. Nobody.
Maurice Mealy is 62 years old. In the late 1940s, he worked for the Johns Manville Company. 30 years later, he developed a disease called asbestosis. It was an irreversible lung disease caused by asbestos fibers clogging the lungs and choking a person to death, slowly. Dr. Arthur Langer is Associate Director of the Environmental Sciences Laboratory at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. He is one of the nation's leading authorities on the medical effects of asbestos exposure.
What we see for this particular individual was that his lung tissues contained an enormous number of asbestos fibers. All of these linear objects that you see are objects that are asbestos fibers.
Maurice Maley's lungs look like the X-ray that Dr. Langer just showed us. 16,500 people have sued Johns Manville. They contend they were exposed to asbestos, either in their work or through being exposed to Johns Manville products. This allegedly caused some of them to contract fatal lung diseases or asbestos-related cancers. Internal industry documents, which have been made available to me, show that as far back as 50 years ago, the industry knew about the dangers of asbestos exposure. Yet manufacturers callously decided to keep this knowledge from the workers. Industry documents suggested that they attempted to censor this information and to keep it out of scientific journals. Earl Parker is a senior vice president of Johns Manville.
The changes from what was submitted to what was published were very minuscule. And in fact, the Johns Manville executive responsible for authorizing the study told the author that under no circumstances would he ask him to change the material, but simply not to make it appear any less favorable to the company than the data would justify. So I really don't think there was any evidence of any editing or control of that information at all. The studies were done. They were done with industry sponsorship, and they were published, and they began the process of controlling dust exposure in our own plants and throughout the industry.
Additional evidence of this cover-up was filed in closed proceedings in a New York courtroom last week. Charles Romer was an attorney for a leading asbestos manufacturer. He filed this affidavit. I'm quoting from the affidavit. It was Manville's policy not to do anything nor to tell the employees of the X-ray findings. Manville has recently filed for bankruptcy. The company pleaded that it could not afford to fight the thousands of lawsuits. Meanwhile, Maurice Maley and many others have been blocked from filing suits because of the bankruptcy move. Earl Parker at Johns Manville.
The net worth of the company, that is the total assets minus the liabilities on the books at the time that we filed on August 26, was about $1.1 billion. We have 16,500 claims pending against us, and we have projected another 30,000 claims between now and the year 2002. So with our average disposition cost of $40,000 per claim, that came down to a number that we would have to book after taking into account the insurance that's available to us of about $700 or $800 million. So you see that really virtually wipes out our net worth.
The asbestos epidemic is an American tragedy, and therefore a story that should be told.
Let's say asbestos was to be banned tomorrow. What about the material that's in place? For the last 20 years, we've been using 500,000 tons of asbestos every year. It's gone up slightly. But on the average, 500,000 tons of fiber has been used in the United States in all varieties of products. We've got 10 million tons of the material in place already. Those in the construction industries, those in the demolition industries, those in the maintenance and repair industries are going to be exposed for the next century. It's a problem that's going to be here for a long time to come.
When I return, I'll tell you about a witness who appeared on my show last week. Today, he's in prison. Last week, I disclosed before these cameras a major scandal. I reported that millions of dollars have been stolen from U.S. military aid to Egypt. Top Egyptian political figures and former CIA and Pentagon officials allegedly are implicated. The day after the program was aired, Egyptian security forces arrested the one Egyptian witness who had agreed to appear on camera. Here's what he had told my associate Dale Van Atta in Cairo.
Have millions of dollars been stolen from the U.S. military assistance program to Egypt?
For sure.
Who stole it?
The Minister of Defense.
Named?
General Kamal Hassan Ali.
And what is he now?
He is the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
That was Mossad Abu El-Kir Badra as he appeared on this show last week. He's a man of extraordinary courage. He had been warned to keep his mouth shut, but he dared to name the powerful Egyptian foreign minister. U.S. sources tell me that Badra has been thrown into one of Egypt's notorious prisons. The fear is that he'll be tortured until he recants his story. But I already have his story on film. Here's more of it.
You're saying that Kamal Hassan Ali, the foreign minister of Egypt today, and the defense minister then, personally lied to you about this contract?
He was lying to the American and to the Egyptian owner of the company, not me alone.
Apparently it isn't safe in Egypt to embarrass the foreign minister. He sent me a denial. From other sources, it was hinted that the authorities would go easier on Badra if I played up the denial. He called the charges malicious lies. He challenged, I'm quoting, any person or party to prove the charges. Well, I accept the challenge. I say to the Egyptian government, release Mossad Badra. The last thing he told my associate Dale Van Atta was this, I'm quoting, the American authorities must investigate this. Well, they're doing exactly that. So I urge the Egyptian government to let Badra come back to the United States and testify. Next week, I'll report on the possible spread of infectious diseases to your neighborhood. I'm Jack Anderson in Washington.
Jack Anderson Confidential is a Jack Berry and Dan Enright production in association with Able Communications.
I'm just in a world of, like limbo, I just have no up and down. There's no, it's just a matter of time till I die. It's just the waiting that's the hard part. Sometimes a guy is going to get killed, he's going to get the electric chair, he's going to be hung or gassed. He knows his date. Me, I don't know it. I don't know what tomorrow brings. We've talked about giving up the children. That's that's even a thought that occurred to us, and that's for their sake more so.
From the West Coast to the East Coast, across the Atlantic to London and Frankfurt to Hawaii, fly World Airways to the world of your dreams. World, the airline for people who hate to waste money.